absolute delight in chatting to Sir Bill Beaumont, CBE, and World Rugby Chairman. He was also an honorary fellow at Myerscough College. So, good morning, Bill. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Gough. It's good to talk to you. Good to see you. You know, you like me, you've got a bit less on top now yourself when you were a young lad running around the fields at Fylde. But you know, delighted and to be with you, and also talk to all the students at Myerscough. It's a top place, and you know, very proud of being associated with the college.
You kind of come from fairly humble background, and I think what's really interesting is how that pathway led you to being World Rugby Chairman.
Well, I was brought up in Chorley. That my mother would be very upset if she thought it was humble. She thought she was pretty posh around Chorley. And you know, look, my father, he played rugby at Fylde. My grandfather had been a member at Fylde, and so I went to a rugby playing school. And so in those days, there were less things to do. When you left school at 18, you went to university or you went to get a job. I went to get a job, and that, you know, your leisure activities were either playing cricket in the summer, which I did at Chorley Cricket Club, or playing rugby in the winter. That's what I did, because that's what I've done before. And those are the two sports I've ever really played. Which I started golf a bit earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, I was never any good at golf. I was always playing military golf. It was never probably much better than me. I think. Yeah. So schooling wise, where did you
I went to school in Shropshire called Ellesmere College, which is a sort of boarding school down there, and that's where I sort of really started to play rugby. And the headmaster played for England actually, and he's still he's still alive, and I still see him at Twickenham. I still call him headmaster. A man called Pierre, who was one of the great sort of educationalists of his time, and I keep in touch with him, and I ask him about things. What would you do here? What would you do there? And he's a great source of advice for me, even now. So there's always a headmaster. You know, there's headmasters that are still around, even when you're 68. You still rely on headmasters. So I then sort of got involved in rugby, joined Fylde, and just sort of messed around on all the lower teams, really, just enjoyed myself. And suddenly realised that I was quite reasonable at it. And then trained hard, got in the first team, and then played county rugby. And then from county rugby, then England trials, and from England trials, got picked for England. But it largely through the Lancashire connection that I got in the England team, because they had some great players with some great time playing for Lancashire. You think of the Tony Neary, the Fran Cottons of this world. You know, they were British Lions, and they were playing county rugby, and they sort of helped me enormously along the way. And then when you think of the Lancashire team, when I finished off, there would have been internationals. Kevin O'Brien from Ireland at fullback, would have been Tony Bond in the centre. There would have been Mike Sleman, John Carlton on the wings.
Yeah.
Smith at halfback, Peter Williams, who played for England as well. And myself, Jim Stiddall played for England, Tony Neary. So there are a lot of very, very good players.
Yeah, that county team, I think they kind of made up the majority of the team that played the North. Was that over at Otley? Was it the All Blacks?
Yeah, there is. I think out of that team, there was, I think there were 10 Lancastrians in the team that beat the All Blacks that day. It's a great occasion for Northern Rugby, really. And I think probably part of the revival of English rugby, because we've been in the doldrums for many, many years. But there have always been lots of good players. And when I look around, the thing that sort of slightly disappoints me now about the modern game and the league system and what have you, that the amount of good teams there were in Lancashire, and you know what it was like. You go in the Lancashire Cup and you play at Widnes, you play at West Park. They'd all have really good players, like Rob Breers at West Park, was a really, really good player, and Widnes had good players, and then St Helens would be, and then there'd be Liverpool would be strong, there'd be Waterloo that's strong, and Orrell were the best team, and Broughton Park could be good, and so Preston would have good players like Wade Dooley and what have you, and sort of Fylde would have good players. Now, where are all these players gone? where are they? You know, that's a question I ask myself. That every team would be tough, and you go to Yorkshire, and you play at Halifax, it'd be hard work, and you play at Morley, these places, and they'd all be good teams. And yet, Northern Rugby, from that point of view, seem to have been in a bit of a decline, unfortunately.
Yeah, I kind of thought about exactly the same thing. You know, would do all these top players that kind of, and you said, when England finally got their opportunity to win the Five Nations, as it was then, over in Paris. I was actually at that game. I was only very small by then, but at that time.
Yeah, you must have been in your mother's arms, I would have thought.
Yeah, she dragged me out to France with my dad, which was quite a special moment to, you know, and something I'll never forget. So yeah, the players that were in that team then kind of fed in through the north, and I don't know how that changed from the powerhouse at the north. I mean, is rugby league taken over a little bit more with the program as it just kind of found that, you know, the southern players, and they've kind of developed better. I suppose, I don't know, is it a little bit like, you know, the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere players? Is it something that we can put right? I mean, I know certainly at Sale and Steve Diamond's plan is to get the northwest players, and they are doing pretty well at the moment with getting, you know, 70-80% of players coming from the northwest playing in the northwest and not going down south.
Yeah, look, I think it's important that the sort of and I obviously know Sale pretty well, like you do. You're heavily involved with their academy and what have you, with Spraggy and the rest of the guys there, feeding many players through Myerscough into the first team ranks at Sale. And obviously, my youngest son Josh, he plays at Sale, and I think Sale is a northwest team, you know, and really, you know, it's important that everybody sort of buys into that concept and feeds their players in that direction, and hopefully then they can succeed and stay playing at Sale, which I think they will do now. When you look at the new ownership over the last couple of years, then not many players are actually leaving Sale, whereby in the past then there's been a huge sort of hemorrhaging of players, not only from the northwest but also the northeast. When you think of that Leeds area that sort of produced lots of very good players who felt that they couldn't sustain it in the north and went down to the bigger teams in the Midlands and the south. And I think with Sale really establishing themselves now as a top 4 team, then I think players will stay in this area, because the one thing about it is that this area produces rugby players.
Yeah.
You know, about it, you don't have to tell, and I use the analogy. I say you don't have to tell players from the north. They know when it's right to pass the ball and not pass the ball. Now, you'll understand what I mean, but it's actually quite. To me, it's a simple thing, but to lots of people are offloading the tackle. Wow, what a great skill! Well, it's a natural thing that I think North Country people do.
Yeah, you know what? It is something that I see quite a lot. You know, I've kind of coming from Leigh, a rugby league background. I started my career in rugby league at school, and the biggest differences I see is just the basic skill that some of the rugby league players and some of the northern-based players have a better skill. And like you say, it's a knowledge. It's just an understanding of when to and how to. Yeah. And from a really early age, they're able to catch, pass, run, hit lines, and do, you know, an awful lot more without necessarily having to coach it. It's a natural thing that they do, yes, from an early age. And is there a debate about, you know, what the crossover is and how we coach that?
I call it rugby nous.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's an incredibly underused word, perhaps, in world rugby. Somebody's got the nous. I mean, I think I might have heard Eddie Jones say it once. You know, I think the Australians kind of understand that nous and that real mentality of what to do. And I mean, they do sort of obviously many other different sports, but I think it's you know, certainly from a.
I also think that good players have time. The one thing you do as a good player, you buy yourself time.
Yeah.
And I think one of the issues with rugby is that actually we're reducing space on the field. What we should actually do is exploit space on the field. And I think because the way the game's played now is very attritional, one-up rugby, and I'd like to think that sort of during my next 4 years, World Rugby, that we look at the laws of the game and look at the laws of the game in the way in which we can create more space. And I think it's really important to create space, because then you get a spectacle. The other thing is, I think the amount of substitutes that we use is that obviously player welfare is paramount. The first thing that many players injured, he should not carry on. But I do think if you watch professional rugby, the amount of changes that take place for the front row is completely changed after an hour, and the shape of the game never changes.
Yeah.
And so there's the same amount of space on the field as there is in the first minute or the last minute. And to me, I think, you've got to bring a little bit of fatigue into the game, and so that does create space.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept that, certainly where I coach over at Tarleton, that, you had 18 players, so obviously just 3 subs, and one of them has got to be a front row. So you're kind of faced with different challenges. I mean, do you see sort of, like, you talk about space and exploiting space from various levels, whether it be international down to the lower league levels. The interesting new law, which I believe is started, is kind of going to a rugby league thing, the 40-20 rule.
Yeah, there's lots of variations that we're looking at to try and just see, and it's only by having trials, Goughy, that you'll actually find out whether it works or not, because you don't know what the unexpected consequences are of a rule change. You might adversely affect somebody else in the game. So it's only by trialing it that you'll find out, and that's what we want to do. Yeah,
no, I think trialing's good, and trying these things. If you don't try them, you'll never find out. I think interesting enough, sort of just going back a little bit to your education pathway, where you went through Ellesmere School, and looking at what is out there now for the options for post 16 into FE and HE. Certainly changed from my day, and changed a little bit from your day as well, Bill. So
yeah, well, changed. It's sort of, I think now the only thing I'd say to young players who are enrolling at Myerscough, for instance, you have the dream, and it's great. You have the dream that you're going to be a professional rugby player, or indeed one of the myriad of courses that you have at Myerscough. Sort of whether you want to be a professional golfer or involved in motor racing, you do many, many, many things really well. But as a rugby player, think, how many professional rugby players are there? How many professional rugby players are there that actually make enough money that they won't have to bother about getting any qualification? And the answer is very, very few. So whatever you do, make certain that rugby is your ambition, but make certain you do something that you can use when your rugby career has finished. So whatever courses that you run, go on a course that you can get a job afterwards, because that's what you got to do when you finish playing. There's only so many pundits, there's only so many journalists, only so many coaches, and so majority of players will have to get a job. So prepare yourself, always have it in the back of your mind that this is a great lifestyle that I've got, but you're only one injury away from your career ending, unfortunately. Yeah. Or when you come to the end of your playing career, you think, well, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go?
Yeah.
So I think that is my big advice I give to any of your students.
Well, that
work hard at your sport. Work really, really hard at the sport, but make certain that you got something behind your name that you can then get a job.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the advice that we give to all our students. It's plan B, if you like. So you've got to maintain that. Like you said, there are very few players who would go from any top class school environment and go on to become professional rugby players and sustain that career. As you said, you're one injury away from career ending. So
yeah, but also, Goughy, what I'd say to many rugby players who obviously have the dream of of playing Premiership rugby. Look, there is a rugby life out there that, as a non-professional player, you can have a fantastic time, really enjoy yourself, and play a high standard of rugby at the levels like Fylde, for instance, or Preston. You know, you can still really enjoy your rugby and, you know, have a good time. Because at the end of the day, 98% of rugby is played by people having a bit of enjoyment. Boys and girls, men and women. You know, it's only the top 2% that is professional. So, and it's there as a recreation. It is a sport. And enjoy it as a sport. And enjoy the good things that I enjoyed in rugby. That dressing room humour, that camaraderie that you had, that Mickey-taking humour that there was in rugby. When you pack in, that's the one thing that you really miss. And all the mates that you make. And when you're playing an amateur game, it doesn't matter whether you've got a thick wallet or a thin wallet. You're accepted for what you do on the field.
Yeah, you're absolutely
perform on the field.
You're absolutely right, Bill. I mean, one thing that epitomises that from my point of view is, you know, when I first came to Fylde, you know, the first person I kind of spoke to was you. And, you know, from that point on, from me being, you know, wet behind the ears, 19-year-old just coming out of England Colts and coming thinking I was, you know, the greatest thing since sliced eggs, you came and said, you know, it's going to be tough. And, you know, you've got to enjoy it, but, you know, you're going to find it tough playing in a big man's world. You've been there, you've seen it, you've done it, and you know, you've taken the knocks and the bumps and the bruises. But the biggest thing for me was the friendship that lasts forever. And the players that I've played with, which you probably played with, like Mickey Weir, Mike Dixon, you know, all these guys were, you know, are still what I'd like to think is, you know, if I saw them walking down the street, I wouldn't, you know, cross over.
But exactly. You know, I bump into players all over the place, and locally, and we have reunions. And to me, that is the great thing about the game. You know, it is happy days.
Yeah. So, thank you for that, Bill. Just a quick one, just on the COVID situation. So, obviously, we're all trying to get back to playing and training, and, you know, small steps. I understand that, and I think everybody else understands that. So with regards to rugby as a whole, do you know, what sort of impact do you think this has had, and will it look the same when we come out the other end? Will we have some different decisions to make? Will we understand where we will be playing?
Look, I think until we decide when we're going to play and when we can play, very, very difficult to make decisions. That normally in life you know when you can do something, but you don't know with this. Now, I think there'll be big challenges in the community game, you know, to get underway. But I think it's essential that they do get underway, because the local rugby club and the local cricket club, for instance, they're very much part of local communities, aren't they? It's important that we get the communities back together. In the professional end, they're obviously they're well catered for with medical testing, etc., which isn't available in the community game. So that will be a challenge there to get that going. But I think certainly there could be some changes around the global season, for instance, the windows, we're sort of talking about that. But on the whole, I think sort of the one thing that this dreadful pandemic has done, it has brought people together.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I've lived where I've lived for, and I'm not really an antisocial person, but you know, it's just I've got to know people around my street, and, you know, like you say, the support that people have given each other through this pandemic has been amazing. So
yeah,
absolutely right. It has brought
the best in people.
Yeah, it has. It's brought the good from people as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's hope we get back playing pretty.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Just a couple of quick fire ones before I let you go. Okay, so best player you played with, both club and county.
Best player I played, but club and county. The best player I played with county would be Frank Cotton. Frank Cotton was the best player. He could play either side of the scrum. He would certainly be the best player. Best club player that I played with, lots of really good players. Tony Richards, who played on the wing, who was a really, really good player. I think the best player probably I played with at Fylde, who won an international, was Ray Taban.
Right, Tam, another Lee lad.
He was from Lee. He played. He was a really good player. Him and Mike Dixon were probably both up. They're probably the two best players.
Good. I would agree with that, actually. I think Dicko and Tabs, know them both.
Yeah.
Best player played against?
Without a doubt, Gareth Edwards.
Gareth Edwards.
Gareth Edwards, best player that I've ever played against. And unfortunately, I didn't play with him too often. But he significant that when the line was successful, that Edwards was at his peak.
You'll have been travelling around quite a bit through your playing career. Who was the worst and best roommate?
Well, when you're captain, you get a separate room.
Oh, right, okay.
You get your own room. Unfortunately, I was captain on quite a few occasions, so that was. I think you always need to try and avoid guys who were snoring, like Hillary with me. She's better for me, I think. So you try to put all the snorers together.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I know we've had a few trips away with Fylde, and it's you do tend to. My roommate was Chris O'Toole, and that was a nightmare.
Yeah.
Okay, final question. Best standoff ever at Fylde Rugby Club?
Steve Gough.
Oh, perfect. Oh, Phil, that's amazing. Thank you.
I
never even prompted you on that one either.
No.
Brilliant. Thank you. It's been amazing.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Goughy. Good luck to everybody, and Myerscough, and hope to see you soon.